What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. It's already going to be week 8, and unfortunately, this is the toughest bye week of the season. All of the Cardinals, Lions, Jaguars, Raiders, Rams, and Seahawks will all be on bye in week 8. So this is kind of the time when our deep benches are going to come into play the most. We've drafted very deep teams, and to start the season, that doesn't matter at all, right? You're pretty much starting your starting lineup, but once we get into this week, 6 teams on bye. I think it's 4 teams in week 9, another 4 teams in week 10. This is the heart of the fantasy season. That's when these deep benches help a lot. Unfortunately, this might be the worst week of the season for the waiver wire. 5 of the top 9 players, I have like the ordered waiver wire, order on the website. 5 of the top 9 are defenses. But we do have 4 names at the top. I think number 1 is Orande Gadsden. Kind of comes down to what you have at tight end, right? If you've got like Kittle, if you've got McBride, you've got Tyler Warren, you don't need to like break the bank to go after Orande because you're probably not going to play him. But even for those of you with a pretty solid tight end, he's still not a bad tight end to go after, just in the off chance that like you outbid someone who really wants a tight end, and then either they sell their whole team for your starter and you can play Orande, or what you should probably do is try to capitalize on this hype for Orande and then sell him instead and still hold on to, like, if you've got McBride, if you've got Tyler Warren, if you've got Kittle, if you've got Bowers coming back, after the bye this coming week, I would still prefer to hold them unless someone's giving you like a running back one in return. But for Orande, we've talked about him for like a month now, more so as a player that we just need to like keep our eye on, right? We've talked about how he's not like a traditional tight end. He's very much just like a big wide receiver. And so it was up to the team that drafted him to utilize in him the correct role. And honestly, it seems like the Chargers are doing that. He is immensely talented. That does not mean that like he's going to maintain this role all season, and he's going to have 7 receptions every game because he now has back-to-back games with 7 receptions. It was his 5th consecutive week, increasing in snaps up to 78%, 7 receptions for 164 yards and a touchdown is one of the best days ever for a rookie tight end. So big play wide receiver. He's not one of these, or tight end, again, big wide receiver basically. He's not like a Mason Taylor, right? Mason Taylor is a good prospect. Unfortunately, the Jets are horrible, right? You look at the difference in passing between the Chargers and the Jets, and it's like, if Mason Taylor was on a better team, he might be more talented than Orande. But Orande gets the ball downfield on a team that might throw the ball 50 times in a game. Mason Taylor gets the ball really close to the line of scrimmage on a team that might have 10 net passing yards in a game. So big differences there. Unfortunate, honestly, for Mason Taylor. But when we're talking about Orande, we were saying, okay, maybe this role doesn't stick when you have Quentin Johnston back. Well, Quentin came back this last week. He played a ton of snaps. I think he led the wide receiver room in snaps, and Orande still had a great game. So not a guarantee it continues going forward, but you have to go after someone who puts up 164 yards and a touchdown, whose snaps are increasing, who has, I think, 8 and 9 targets over the last 2 games, even if it is just, I get him on my team, I end up trading him away, package him with someone else, find a tight end needy team. My current recommendation is only like, I haven't locked it in, but in that like 7 to 10% range. If someone is going to go after him for like 15 to 17% of their fab, I'd be okay losing him because, again, I don't think he's going to be like a mid-range tight end 1 rest of season. I'd probably be okay going up to like a number 3 claim. I wouldn't use number 1 on him. I probably wouldn't use a number 2 either. But I think that's kind of where I'm at in that general 7, we'll call it 7 to 12 range, depending on need for percentage, and then up to a number 3 claim. I don't think I would go higher than that just yet. Behind Orande, I would say it's Jaxson Dart. I don't think we go over this for very long because I would say in most competitive leagues he is rostered, but I was looking through, of course, I look at Sleeper for roster percentage because I think just like Sleeper is the most active leagues, and I was checking through that, and he's only rostered in 54% of leagues. So for 46% of you that play on Sleeper, he's available somehow, even though in the first, 4 starts of his career, he's got 19.8, 17.6, 23.6, and 29.4 fantasy points. Like, obviously, he's one of these cheat codes, these hyper mobile quarterbacks that are capable of running for like 50 yards and a touchdown. And when you're capable of that and you're putting up these numbers in your first starts, like, it makes you honestly sad that Neighbors tore the ACL. Because imagine the season Malik Neighbors could have had, and it just didn't happen. Hopefully Malik Neighbors can, get fully healthy for next season. He's young enough to where we're not concerned long term. But yeah, Jaxson Dart obviously needs to be rostered in all formats. Behind Dart, I think you're looking at Monangai. Played a season high 46% of the snaps this last week, handled 13 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. Also added 2 receptions on 3 targets for another 13 yards. That was by far his strongest total workload this season. And it's worth noting it didn't all come in garbage time. I think maybe you can look at the box score. Maybe you guys were watching with like red zone and stuff, and you saw it was like a 20-0 game, very close to half. So it looked like maybe this was a blowout and Monangai got blowout run. That's not really what happened. Chicago got up 20-0 with like, a little over a minute, something like that, left before half. And then they hit on the huge play, and then eventually the touchdown to Olave. They then score on the first drive in the third quarter. So yes, Chicago got up 20-0, but it was 20-14 by the time they got the ball back. So this was never really a blowout game. You even had, it was like a 12-point game with maybe 5 minutes left on that final drive. And they went to Monangai to kind of close the clock out when, the Saints were trying to stop the ball, trying to stop the run, get the ball back so they can maybe score onside kick and maybe win after that. So this was still a competitive game for the whole time. And we still had 16 opportunities for Monangai. Now, Swift also played great, and Swift has been playing great. So this is not Monangai just like taking the job away from DeAndre Swift. That is absolutely not the case. But we kind of know Ben Johnson likes doing this. He likes having, explosive running back like a Jahmyr Gibbs role, and he likes having a Dave Montgomery role. It kind of seems like that's what we're looking at right here. Not a 1-for-1 because, obviously Swift is not as good as, well, really neither are as good as the counterpart on Detroit, but you can kind of view it in that sort of sense into what they're trending towards. That makes Monangai very valuable. It makes him a tier 1 handcuff. I'd still probably call him a handcuff because I don't think he gets 16 opportunities every week. But if we're going to trend towards 10 to 12 opportunities as an expectation from Monangai in competitive to leading game scripts, that makes him someone where you could like start to consider him, especially in these bye weeks, as that second running back. And if that's the case, plus the obvious upside, if there's an injury to DeAndre Swift, again, it makes him one of the more valuable handcuffs, someone that should be rostered, especially with all these buys coming. And the Bears already had their bye, so you don't have to worry about a bye for Monangai. After Monangai, the last like good skill player you want to go after is Darnell Mooney. Brutal start to the season for him, right? He gets hurt late in camp. We thought he was going to miss a lot of time. Ends up he only misses 1 game, but then suffers another injury in week 4, misses more time. So he's been injured for months, it seems like at this point. Finally returns 83% of snaps, brings in 3 receptions, 68 yards on 5 targets. Basically, like he's not someone that you're going to throw into wide receiver 2 and trust every week. But if you play in a 3 wide receiver league, if you play in a 2 flex league, if you play in a 14-team league or larger, he is someone you can legitimately start, especially with all these buys. He is an every down wide receiver on not an amazing offense, and I don't really trust Michael Penix Jr., but if you had 2 wide receiver, 2 flex spots, and you had a couple guys on bye, it would not be bad at all in pretty much any matchup to start Darnell Mooney in that spot. He's been very good. He's someone who was the wide receiver 37 and half PPR points per game last season. He's probably a top 40 wide receiver rest of season. And I think he's just not rostered in a lot of leagues because people didn't want to go after him in the draft because of the injury. Then he comes back and gets hurt right away. People have buys, people have things, they have to get rid of him. And I think he just people didn't know if he was going to play this coming week. And so because of that, I don't know. I think he's just on free agency in a lot of leagues because people didn't realize he'd be back. So no one went after him last week. But I don't know. He's an every down wide receiver on a team that plays in a dome that's going to have to throw the ball a decent amount. They're trailing a lot of games. I think he's definitely worth going after. After those 4, you're looking at streaming defense. The streaming defense is kind of that I kind of call it this cutoff range because you're spending probably anywhere from 1% to 3% depending on the week on a streaming defense. And so it's you've got these top options. And then you've got streaming defense where I wouldn't spend more than 1-3%. I wouldn't spend more than maybe a number 5 or 6 claim on them. So anyone that comes in after that is mostly just if you want to spend 1% of your fab, go for it. If you want to spend in a 12-team league, a 10, 11, 12 claim, go for it. If you're able to just risk it and add these players, that's probably the move. But that's kind of the range. So when we go over streaming defense, anyone after that, is fine, and we'll kind of break them down in different buckets, but they're not amazing players to go after. And if they're still available, if they're players where it's like we like the long-term upside of, and no one has been rostering them, there's no reason to go after them this week. Wait, grab them as like a free agent, not a claim. Just don't spend a claim or any fab on them potentially. So for streaming defense this week, you're looking at the Colts versus the Titans, looking at the Bills at the Panthers with probably Andy Dalton a quarterback, Patriots versus the Browns, Bucks at the Saints, Falcons versus the Dolphins. I'll have the defense projections up tomorrow. I'll update them throughout the week, but I think that's how I'd order it right now. Again, I want to reiterate, I've been over this before, but it's worth repeating. You're not trying to find a defense long-term to stream every week. There are like 10 teams in the league where I just kind of don't want to play defenses against them. You should only be expecting a couple points. There's a couple teams in the league where I couldn't care less what defense is playing against that offense. I want to play that defense. You are much, much, much better off streaming the matchup and playing whatever defense is playing these awful teams. The Titans, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Browns, like whoever is playing those offenses, it's good to stream the defense instead of saying, oh, I've got a really good defense. Sure, they're playing, the Chiefs this week, but I guess I'll keep rolling with them. No, you don't want to be doing that. Like, it's not worth taking the hit like 40% of the time just to keep a good defense. It's fine if you want to keep a good defense and maybe roster another one. I would say starting in week like 12, that's the move, is to have two defenses you want to stream rest of season. But for the most part, find the really bad teams in the NFL, find the weather games, find the backup quarterbacks if there's injuries, and stream the defense against that. Don't try and find a good defense and play them in every matchup. So, back to skill players. We'll go over running backs now. There's a couple more you can look at. So after Monangai, it's Tyjae Spears, Brashard Smith, and Devin Neal in that order, definitely. I think there's a chance that the Titans trade away Tony Pollard. If that happens, Spears would be a featured running back. They would probably give him like 80 to 85, maybe even 90% of the workload in some weeks. He's already one of the better handcuffs in the NFL because he has some baseline production every week. You're not starting him on like a good team, right? Like maybe if you've got, the 6 teams on bye, maybe like 2 of your running backs are on bye and he's your running back too. All right. He can maybe get you by at some point there, but you don't want to be playing Tyjae Spears at running back 2 right now. The upside is more so he's a good running back. Like he's a very talented early down back. He's great in the receiving game, even with the Titans being a terrible offense. If they trade away Tony Pollard or if Tony Pollard got hurt and he can soak up 85, 90% of the workload, that would be someone we're absolutely starting every week. For Brashard Smith, he honestly looks so good in the receiving game. Like his acceleration is awesome. The hands are great. Like he gets the ball in these screen passes and he's just gone instantly for 5 yards. Like it just feels like every time he gets the ball, the blocks are there. He's already 5 yards downfield. And so they're utilizing him great in that area. I don't really view him as someone to go after in like a standard league, even in half PPR. Like all of his value is coming in the receiving game to where I think you got to be in a full PPR league to go after him. He did mix in for more carries this week, but it was a complete blowout. Like did Mahomes get benched? I think it was like late third quarter. Like it was definitely the whole fourth quarter. Maybe it was the late third quarter as well. This team was not playing the starters. And so that's why he got more of the carries. They still view him as mostly that passing down option. But if you are in like a 14 or 16 team league, PPR league, even in like a 12 team league with like, 7 bench spots, very competitive. So there's really nothing on free agency for running backs. Again, in full PPR, he's someone that maybe could get you by at some point, but I don't think has like significant upside because he's never going to take over like Pacheco and Hunt. He's never going to be like used at the goal line over Hunt, never going to be used consistently on early downs over Pacheco. So again, upside in especially in non-PPR isn't really there. Then for Devin Neal, it's mostly injury related. So we don't have the full details yet, but Kendre Miller did suffer a knee injury. The team seems to think it could be somewhat long-term, but we'll know more on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's not great, though, when the team says they're kind of concerned. There's usually a reason why they're concerned. So we'll find out. If we do know that he's going to miss significant time, then it at least opens the door for Devin Neal. Like, I don't think he's some high-end prospect. I don't think he's going to go out there and just take the job away from Kamara. But you also got to figure, like, they're not trading Kamara. Kamara basically said he's going to retire if they trade him, so no one's going to go out and trade him for him. But the Saints stink. And if they continue to lose game after game after game, and they get later into the season, it's the same thing we talked about with Kendre Miller. You liked Kendre Miller because it was like, well, even if they don't trade Kamara, if they're tanking later in the season, and Kamara hasn't been that great this year anyways, they could easily bench Kamara and just go with what other running back is leading the way. If Kendre's out, that running back could now be Devin Neal. But again, it's a very low probability bet. I would say you have to have at least 7 bench spots in a 12-team league to go after him. But in a 14 or 16-team league, if you're looking for someone as like that last player on your bench and you're like, man, there is nothing on free agency, there's at least a path now to touches. And when you have a rookie who's now has a path to touches, who knows, right? Probably not going to be good. But what if Devin Neal goes out there, starts ripping off like 4.4, 4.5 yards per carry, looks half decent, maybe they see what they have in him and utilize him moving forward. Again, probably not. But if you have no other options, it's worth kind of a lottery ticket on your bench. At wide receiver, you have a lot of options. It's just that none of them are like all that inspiring. I'll break it down in 2 groups. Group 1 is going to be the guys you could maybe stream this coming week if you have buys and injuries. Group 2 is more like your upside stashes that I probably don't want to be streaming right now, but have some upside later in the year. In Group 1, you've got Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin versus the Cowboys this coming week. You've got Leggett or Coker versus the Bills this coming week, and likely with Andy Dalton at quarterback, which I'll be honest, I think at this point, given how Bryce has played recently, I would view as like a lateral move. I don't think it's like the huge upgrade when Bryce was playing terrible, but I also don't think that like Bryce is playing well enough right now to where like Andy Dalton is any sort of downgrade. It's probably a lateral move, so almost don't consider it. Alec Ironmore at the Colts this coming week, and then Kayshon Boutte versus the Browns. Again, none of these wide receivers, even with all these teams on bye, are going to grade out as top 25 options. But again, with all the teams on bye, you might just get unlucky. You might need someone at that last wide receiver spot, that flex spot, that second flex spot. I definitely prefer the Broncos wide receivers just, because that game could shoot out. These are 2 really good offenses. We did not see Denver do anything for the first 3 quarters this last week, but then they went absolutely off in the 4th quarter. Could we see, Denver continue that, play well this coming game, and then my goodness, Dallas is playing out of their minds right now. Really, Dak is playing out of his mind. So we could see this offense kind of take off, this game kind of take off. Either one or live for a touchdown, live for a big play. The floor, of course, you got to know with any Denver wide receiver not named Courtland Sutton is very, very, very low. But Mims, Franklin, they're both playing well. If Denver could push into the 20s, into the upper 20s, they both have upside. Leggett and Coker, they face the Bills. The Bills coming off bye, even on the road, are going to play well. The Bills are going to put up points. They're probably going to score into the 30s. Maybe they're probably going to score 30. I think they'll be around that range. So that's going to have the Panthers in a trailing script with a pocket passing quarterback. Could either Leggett or Coker rack up 4 or 5 receptions? Certainly that could help you out. Leggett had the big game this last week, but long term, I do still think Coker's the better wide receiver, the one that you probably want. Like if we were looking at weeks like 12 plus, I think you'd rather have Coker. But the snaps were somewhat limited for Coker this last week just because they're ramping him up. And I don't know if that's going to be a 2-week ramp up, a 3-week ramp up, or like maybe it's a 1 week and this next week he all of a sudden takes over Leggett. I don't know if that's going to happen though. If I had to guess how the rankings will shake out this week, I would guess that Leggett will be slightly ahead of Coker just because we don't know. Until we actually see Coker go out there and be used on like 80% of the snaps, we can't totally buy that it's going to happen. And so I'd still probably prefer Leggett, but either one of them I think would be fine to stream in this matchup. For Alec, seems like Ridley's going to miss some time with this hamstring injury. Also, I think there's a chance Ridley's traded away at some point. He turns 31 in December. The Titans are a complete joke this season. They're in full-on rebuild mode. So, that rebuild we obviously know does not include Calvin Ridley. So I get if you look at kind of the trade table or the waiver wire table on the website and you see Spears, you see Alec, you see Chimere DK as like that last spot, as a complete desperation deeper league kind of ad. You see that and you're like, it's the Titans. Why would we want that? It's really just because if they go for the tank, they're going to feature the young guys, right? If they get rid of Pollard, they get rid of Ridley, you're going to have Spears, Alec, and DK kind of as those top running backs and wide receivers. Again, the offense is still horrible, so it's not like any of these guys are going to smash, but all 3 at least have paths to production. The order is absolutely Spears, relatively decent drop down to Elick, and then a small drop down to DK, because Spears has way more upside than Elick or DK. But again, if there's a trade, if they keep being held out, they could be okay for you as a spot start. And then with Booty, it feels very points chasey, and it probably is, right? Especially because he's got 80% of his targets, and those targets are coming deep downfield. Like, he's going to hit regression. He's not consistent. He could easily go out there any week, have one catch for 10 yards, and you're like, why did I play Kayshon Boutte this week? But I think we also need to sometimes take a step back and remember how we got to this point with Boutte, and think if this was a high-end prospect that we were super excited about in Dynasty, right? A second-round pick last year, maybe has a bad rookie year, but all of a sudden starts doing this. Would we be thinking about him differently? Because remember, he was an unbelievable prospect at LSU. He was trending towards being a first-round pick in the draft. He has this ankle injury. He doesn't really get past that. He's talked recently about how he had a lot of character concerns. He wasn't really taking things seriously at LSU. He never got back to being as dominant as he was pre-injury. He falls in the draft, right? He has 2 receptions on 7 targets as a rookie. And so he is completely written off, even ending last season very, very strong. He started off pretty slow, and no one took him seriously. Truly, he was a great prospect, but because he had such a large amount of time between being great and starting to do better later last year, we mostly wrote him off. But again, had he been a high-end prospect and not gotten hurt, had he gone earlier in the draft, I just feel like people would be a lot more excited about the production that we've seen thus far. He has either 100 yards or a touchdown in 4 of 7 games this season. He's playing 70% of the snaps. He gets downfield looks. He's utilizing the red zone. I mean, again, this is a 23-year-old wide receiver who has a clear red zone role, a near every down role on an offense, scoring 30.25 points per game over the last month. And this week, they play a pass funnel defense in the Browns. And we've had games recently for New England where they just haven't had to throw the ball all that much, and they've been hyperly efficient throwing. They are capable of dropping back 45 times in a game. And if you run into a couple of those game scripts, maybe he does have upside. So I think he's got probably more upside than we're willing to give him credit for. And while he probably is still points chasey to go after, I don't know. This is a better offense than a lot of the players we've been talking about, with better quarterback play. He's playing all the time. He's young. He was a great prospect. He's athletic, and he's playing great. Yes, he's gotten lucky to catch 80% of his targets, but he's caught 80% of his targets downfield. He's clearly playing well, and they clearly trust him. So I don't know. I feel like maybe I move him up a little bit. I'm definitely going to move him up rest of the season after this last game. And I don't know. I think kind of trending up for Kayshon Boutte, and really trending up for this whole offense, unless your name is Travion Henderson, who we'll definitely go over later this week. As for the stashes that you're looking at, it's again Luther Burden and then Jack Beck, or Besh, I think it is. For Luther, we've been over it a million times. I don't know when it's going to happen. I can promise you at some point, Luther Burden will break out. He's better than Zacchaeus. He just has more talent. He fits what Ben Johnson wants from that wide receiver in this offense. I just think he's still developing, and there's probably some things behind the scenes that we just can't know yet, and that's why Ben Johnson doesn't fully trust him as that third wide receiver. But it's going to happen at some point. Does it happen in 2 weeks, in a month, in 2 months? I don't know. I genuinely don't know if it's going to happen in 2 weeks or 2 months, if it's going to happen this year or early next year. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I still really like him as that last wide receiver on your bench. If you're like Nick, I have too many buys, too many injuries. I need this last player to start this next week. It's okay to cut him, get someone you can play this week, and try and get more production, because I still do not trust putting Luther Burden into the starting lineup. But if you've got 7 bench spots and you don't really need that last bench spot, and you have that as an upside stash at wide receiver, I absolutely like him, because if we got a trade for DJ Moore, if he elevated past Olamide Zacchaeus, if we got an injury, if he just breaks out, there's a number of different paths here. And if the snaps go up, he has been great on a per route basis. He would be someone we're starting in fantasy. So I still like him long term, but you can't trust it in your starting lineup right now. And then as for Besh, of all the trade rumors, right? I've kind of made up a couple rumors here. I don't know that Pollard's going to get traded. I don't know that Ridley's going to get traded. I feel very confident that Jakobi Meyers is going to be traded, and traded sometime soon. This is by far the easiest one to believe. He literally requested a trade earlier this year. The Raiders are not making the playoffs. Besh was drafted as the replacement for Jakobi Meyers, so they already have the replacement. It just makes zero sense for them to keep Jakobi Meyers. And we've seen Besh, kind of trend up in snaps, 75%. 2 weeks ago, 63%. This last week, you kind of have to throw this week's game out entirely for the Raiders. Like, they had 30 snaps. I think someone had the stat on Twitter or X where they were like, they had 30 snaps. The next fewest snaps for any team at any point this season was 40. So think about that for a second. Like, I know you can look at the production for the Raiders and be like, what the heck? Like, they did absolutely nothing. They had 10 fewer snaps than the next least snaps of any team all season. That is crazy. If they had played 20 more snaps, you'd have a lot more production for all these players. And again, Kansas City is just not a matchup that they're going to do well in. It was a complete blowout in the entire 3 quarters? Like, honestly, it's like a blowout by the second quarter. But yeah, for Besh, it's like they're going to trade Meyers. So he's going to become a full-time slot wide receiver for this team. He's available in basically 100% of leagues. The 8-team leagues, you're not getting them. 10-team leagues, you're not getting them. 12-team leagues with more bench spots, even a 12-team league, I don't know if you have to, but in deeper formats. And as a name to keep in mind, if they trade Meyers and then all of a sudden he goes out there and he plays well, understand that it makes sense that he would do that given the opportunity that's there. But then also understand that Bowers will be back after the bye, and so that'll eat into the production as well. One note here is that it would be Besh over Thornton. Thornton is like a pure outside wide receiver who's just needs a lot more time to develop, but he doesn't benefit from Meyers being gone. Meyers directly benefits Besh. It has no real impact on Thornton. Other than that, there's not much on free agency. Truly, Orande was the only tight end I'd be looking at on free agency right now. Jaxson Dart's probably the only quarterback. It's a really bad week for streaming quarterback. Hopefully you have an option. I'll say one interesting name is Aaron Rodgers. It's a bad match against the Packers, but it's the revenge spot, right? He's at home versus the Packers. If they get anywhere close to the end zone, they're not running it. He's going to try and score 4 touchdowns himself. Maybe he runs one in, but he's going to be throwing to these tight ends and to DK Metcalf a lot. So you could truly stream Rodgers this coming week purely because of the narrative. But yeah, it's a really bad week for streaming. And then we already talked about the defenses. So I will have the full rest season rankings updated later today, but then I'll do another update on Tuesday, probably another update on Wednesday as well. As per you guys' request, I will pin a comment Tuesday morning to this video going over everything relevant from the Monday night game. So if anything happened on Monday night where you would want my take for that player on waiver wire, if I add anyone to the waiver wire table, I will pin a comment and talk about all of that in that comment. I'll be back Wednesday. It's one of my favorite trade targets this week. Thursday, it's going for the week 8 rankings. And then Friday, it's one of my favorite underdog plays this week. That'll do it for this one, though. And thank you all for watching.